Hi there, welcome to my channel. My name is Priscilla, and today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about this book, Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons. This is the book that I use to teach my now 7.5-year-old how to read, and I'm currently using this book with my 5.5-year-old. And I will be giving you, flipping through the book and giving you an idea of what it looks like and how the lessons are structured. But really the point of this video is to share with you how it's worked for us and why it is that I decided to use this book with my second son, and most likely I will use this book as well with my now 3-year-old daughter when she's ready to learn how to read. So what I really like about this book is that it's phonics based reading lessons. I really appreciate that, and I also appreciate that the lessons are very short and that I do not really need anything else in order to teach them how to read. Like, this is it. This is the program. The book is the program. And so the simplicity of that was very advantageous for me and my family. And I wasn't sure if it was going to work out with my son when I first came across the book and decided to give it a try. But thankfully, it did work out. And right now, as I use it with my second son, it is working out very well as well. Now, I have met families who use the book and they start very young. They start to use the book when their child is under the age of 5. I personally like to wait until my children are at least 5, or at least very close to 5, I should say. I believe with my first son, he was a couple of months shy of turning 5 when we started using the book. And the reason why we did that was because he really wanted to learn how to read in order to read to his baby sister. He had just become a big brother again, and he knew that he could learn how to read at this point, and so he was very much looking forward to being able to read to his siblings. And so he asked if I could teach him how to read, and I had already purchased the book, and so it worked out very well. And we started very slowly, and we picked up speed as towards the end of it, as his capacity increased to sit through the lesson. And so what I like to do when I start out with a child, obviously waiting until they're ready is really important for me, just because I feel like the process is just a lot easier. It happens a lot more quickly than trying to teach them how to read when they are not developmentally prepared for that. And so in my experience, when they're nearing the age of 5, it is usually when they're ready to go and very much interested in learning how to read. Before that age, I really focus on just reading aloud to them. I read tons of books in English and also in Portuguese, and some in Spanish as well. And so reading is very much a part of their lives from day one. It's more so the formal sitting down to learn how to read that I try to wait until I know that they're ready and interested. Obviously, if my child is 7 years old and not interested in reading, I would not be waiting any longer. I would probably, be more firm about their need to start to read. But honestly, until they're 7, I would probably be fine if my child did not have any interest in reading whatsoever, for whatever reason, right? And again, I'm talking specifically about kids who are typically developing. And so I know that's different for families where the children might have a learning disability or some kind of, or something else that they're dealing with, right? So obviously, you know your child best, and you would be able to assess and make that decision for your family, for your child. And so what I usually do, I introduce the book to them. I explain to them kind of, that we would be doing these lessons each day, or a few times a week is usually what I go for. So this is my first son's chart. This is my second son's chart. As you can see, we are currently on lesson 81 with my 5.5-year-old. And so every time we finish a lesson, he can come and put a sticker there. And I like to write their names. I folded it for privacy, but I write their names, their first and last name, learns to read, and then in the back, I write a note, just sharing, you know, like the date when we first started, how old they were, when it is that they completed, just a word of encouragement to them, for them to keep loving books and loving to read. And I hope that, you know, this is something that they'll hold on to and maybe even show their kids if they have children. And so that is just one little thing that we do to encourage them and motivate them to keep going. And so with my son, with my first son, what we did was we started slow. We were doing about 3 lessons a week. We would usually complete a full lesson in one sitting. So let's say we were doing Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Monday we would do, let's say, lesson 1, Wednesday lesson 2, and then Friday lesson 3. So in one sitting, we would get through a full lesson. And later on, when we started doing reading lessons every day, he continued to be able to sit through and complete a full lesson each time that we were doing phonics. With my second son, currently, we had to tweak things a little bit. The initial lessons, I found that he could sit through them. He could complete the full lesson in one sitting. However, once we got to, I want to say it was probably lesson number 70, late 60s, 70, I saw that it was taking us a long time to get through those lessons. And I find that he actually gets distracted more easily. So that's one reason why the lessons tend to drag a little bit. Another thing that I noticed also is that I feel like he struggles a little bit with the near work, more so than my older son did. I can see that, like, his eyes, he starts to get tired. And so I just made the decision to sit down to do reading lessons every day, Monday through Friday. However, we split up the lesson, and we are now actually doing 1 lesson a week. So what that has looked like for us, and I can show you, I can open the page to a lesson. What that has looked like for us, for example, for lesson 80, is we'll do the first task where we're reading the words. We'll read these. We'll do that on day 1. We'll do and read the same words on day 2. And then on day 3, we'll read the story. Sometimes we can get through the whole story, but sometimes he gets very, very tired. And I can tell, like, he's really struggling with his sight and to stay focused. And so what we'll do sometimes, instead of reading the first read being the entire story, we might do half and then finish the story the next day. But basically, usually on Friday, what our Friday reading lesson looks like is him reading the full story in one sitting, right? So at least once he gets to read the entire story straight through. And that's usually happening by Friday. Sometimes it happens earlier. And so let's say for a particular lesson, he was able to get through it and it wasn't, he didn't struggle through it. what I have done is I'll pick up a different reader, something simple that he can read, and we'll read that together, so that he has reading that day, but just not using this particular book. And I've tried to assess to see if his issue has to do with maybe he's not strong enough in terms of like his skills and when it comes to sounding out. And it's really not that. He can sound out the words. He recognizes all of the words that he should be recognizing and reading quickly at this point. What I'm finding is really something that has to do either with his sight. And again, that's something that I have to look into and have his eyes checked to see what might be going on there. And so I don't like to push too hard. Again, he's just 5. And so my goal when it comes to reading is for my children to enjoy reading. And that has been the case for my first son. I mean, in his downtime, that's all he does. He reads. If he's not outside playing, if he's not building Legos, if, whenever he has a moment where he feels kind of bored and doesn't know what to do with his time, he picks up a book and he's reading chapter books. He's reading at a 3rd grade reading level at this point, at 7.5, and he loves it. He loves to read. And part of it, I believe, is because there was never a time when I was pushing him to learn how to read. I really allowed and am allowing them, with my second as well, to move forward as they're ready to move forward. Again, if they were older and having a hard time or just not interested, I would be more firm and probably push a little bit more, or I would, get support, right, to have them evaluated to see if there's anything going on. But again, because they're so young, I don't freak out at all. I just kind of, try to not be frustrated and bring frustration into the lesson. There have been times where I'm working with both of them, where I was working through a lesson and they just didn't feel like doing the lesson. And I'm honest with them, because we don't start formal lessons until they're 6. So I'll say, hey, you don't have to do this. You want to go and play, right? And so sometimes they would say like, yeah, I would rather go play. But usually they would just get their act together because they wanted to get through the lesson. And for whatever reason, they were just distracted or having a hard time. And then they'll say like, no, actually, I do want to continue with the lesson. They love to put the sticker on the chart and whatnot. So so again, because we do start formal lessons at the age of 6, I would be completely fine with, let's say my daughter, who's 3, decided she didn't want, if she just didn't show an interest in reading yet, I would wait until she's 6 to start something like this, or, some other reading program. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to show you a little bit more, just the inside of the book. All right, so here is Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons. I used this book for my 7-year-old, and I am currently using the same program for my 5.5-year-old. And so I'm just going to flip through the book just so you have an idea what it looks like. There are detailed instructions on how to use the book and kind of the philosophy around why they did things the way that they did. They give you a pronunciation guide so that you can become familiar with the symbols that they use to represent the sounds. Again, they explain exactly what it is that you're supposed to do in each lesson. They give suggestions for additional activities that you can do. And they talk about the schedule. So one of the things that they say that typically lessons do not take more than 15 minutes. But, you know, that varies, right? It depends. And I have found that in working with 2 children, it has varied between my 2 sons. And so it's literally 100 lessons, and the lessons are split into different tasks. So you have sound introduction, directions on different ways to work with the sound. Everything that is in red are the things that you will say out loud to your child. Everything that is in black are instructions to the parent or teacher. So it's scripted, right? It tells you exactly what it is that you are supposed to say as you introduce each task and go from point to point within those tasks. When you first start out, it feels a little awkward for sure. It felt awkward for me, and it's just very new way to relate and interact with your child, so it does feel a little awkward at first. But once they understand and they get the flow of the lessons, because they do follow the same format as the lessons progress, it does become easier and even enjoyable depending on your child's personality, their interest in learning to read. All that really does, I believe, play a factor in how well this particular style in program will work for your child, for you and your child. And so again, you are introducing a sound every lesson or 2, and then they're practicing, and they start reading very short phrases. See me read. And again, they have a very particular way of helping the child learn the sounds, right? Because depending on when a parent is using the book, some of the concepts might just be too abstract for the child. So so they basically introduce, for example, in this word read, the smaller A, the fact that this A is small is indicating to the child that they do not sound out this letter, right? That the focus is here, and that only the E is to be read or pronounced. Again, it takes a little bit just to get used to how they set it up, but I found that this is a very thorough way of teaching phonics. It worked very well with my first son, and it's working well for my second son as well. I suspect that it will probably be fine for my daughter when she's also ready to do this. Now, I have met families where they use this and they start out when the child is as young as 3 or 4. I personally don't do that. I wait until they're closer to 5 or already 5 to introduce this to them. That was the case for my son and for both of my sons. Just because it's a lot of near work, and for their eyes, I just feel like I personally just prefer to wait until they're more developed physically and cognitive and intellectually as well, and just more ready for it. And as you can see, what they read picks up, and some of these little crutches, so to speak, to teach them how to go about reading, they slowly are removed, right? So these symbols are supposed to help the child remember that the k sound is fast, and then these, when they sound it out, they drag out the an. And so it just goes to show which of the sounds they drag and which ones they do not. But then later on, you don't have those anymore, right? And the text becomes, the font starts to become smaller, and the text becomes longer as well. Towards the end, much longer. There are reading comprehension. There's a writing component as well, where they get to practice the different sounds, writing the sounds. They don't introduce the letters of the alphabet, the actual names of the letters, until later, right? Because the idea is you're really starting with the sounds of the letters. But usually I would suspect that usually by the time a child is starting to learn how to read, they already know the alphabet. They've been singing the alphabet song, identifying letters. So by the time a parent might be interested in picking up this book, their child already knows the alphabet, which was the case with my son, and even with my second son as well. I didn't focus on sounds until we were ready to start learning to read. And so we're in lesson 80 right now with him, so we pretty much just skipped this because he already knows all the names of the letters. And I covered the images because there is like reading comprehension related to the illustrations and the story. And so these are covered while they do the first reading, and then you uncover to ask them to look at the illustration and answer some questions. And again, there is writing practice as well. And then at the end, you can see longer text. The font is slightly smaller. Towards the end, again, full page text. I haven't covered these yet because we're not here yet, but before we get to it, I'll use a sticky note to cover the illustrations. And that's the 100th lesson right here. So that is just me flipping through the book. I hope that this video was helpful. If it was, please like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments if you have used this book, if it did or did not work out for your family. Also, let me know if you have any other questions, and I will see you in my next video. Take care. Bye-bye.